Hi, I'm Beth Green, and I'm the founder of the innerrevolution.org. Today, I would like to talk to us about a vision for where we're going. In our 2016 election cycle, we're seeing a lot of anger and righteous indignation, and we're hearing a lot of yelling, and I feel like yelling too. But a lot of our politicians are taking advantage of the anger that many of us feel about being left out of the system and are not really offering us any alternative. Some are coming up with suggestions, and we need to be listening to them. But what I want to talk about is something that goes beyond what any of our current political candidates are talking about. And it's a vision of what we want that is based on a real revolution, a total social, psychological, economic revolution, where we shift from competition to cooperation. And some of you are already going to say, this is silly, I'm turning this off. This sounds like another pie in the sky. And I'm going to tell you that it's an apple pie in the sky because it's as American as apple pie, which probably isn't American, by the way. We don't have to acknowledge that. Because cooperation is the essence of who we are. We the people. Remember that? We the people? And of course, at that time, it wasn't really we the people. It was we the white men. But the idea was good, right? And then we had our barn-raising ancestors. Somebody needs a barn raised. Everybody got together, right? Barn raising. Socialism. We have to stomp that out. People can't take their power into their own hands and help one another. See, all it is cooperation. And I'll tell you something else. Many religions, including Christianity, which is still probably the most prevalent religion in our nation, are based on the idea that God is in everything and that God is in everyone. Socialism, radical, communism, get rid of it, stomp that idea out. You know, it isn't surprising, actually, that some of the most radical people in Latin America were priests, because they understood what Jesus was trying to say, which was that we are one another, we need to take care of one another. That's what cooperation is really about. But we have been so brainwashed, we can't even think that way. It's like, oh my God, that makes you a communist, or that makes you a utopian, or that makes you, well, it makes you an American, and it makes you a member of the human race as well. So I want to talk a little bit about what I'm seeing and what I'm hoping for and what we are all envisioning and what we are embodying and what we all want. And I want to talk about what gets in the way of common sense, that this is what we're all longing for and what we're needing. Now, if you have ever been to a potluck, you're a communist. Do you know that? Did you know that? You know, the essence of communism is from each according to his ability, to each according to her need. Get it? Potluck. So you have a list of stuff. Somebody's going to bring the pasta salad. Somebody is going to bring the turkey. It's not that I'm advocating meat eating, but I mean, that's the way it is, right? Well, the poor person doesn't say, oh yeah, I'm going to bring the turkey. The poor person brings the macaroni and cheese, right? Or the bean dip. And the person who has more automatically says, well, I have more money, I'll bring the turkey. Or if nobody has any money, which happens, a bunch of us get together and bring the turkey. You see, it's so obvious. From each according to his ability, to each according to his need and her need. And when we get there, we all eat. And we all make the thing that we're best at preparing, right? And don't we love potlucks? Most of us, except those of us with special dietary needs who can't eat anything and have to only eat our own food. That's communism, guys. That's communism. That's what you're so afraid of. You know why you're afraid? Because you've been brainwashed. We have been brainwashed. Because the whole idea of cooperation and getting together to support one another was drummed out of our world at the end of the 1940s. See, we used to be allies with the Soviet Union in order to defeat the Nazis and the fascists. But then we and the Russians became enemies. And then we saw communists everywhere. And the House Un-American Activities Committee came out in the 40s. And Hollywood writers and stars were blacklisted. And it was a time of terror in this country. And then Senator Joe McCarthy went out there and he said, there are, 25 known communists and blah, 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 blah. Nobody even knew what it was. But I'll tell you something. There used to be a time when communists and socialists were in the union movement. And they were very, very devoted union members. And this was one of the ways of squelching the union movement. Because the union movement was saying, well, why should the owners get all the money? Why shouldn't we get a fair deal here? Well, that is downright subversive. Share the wealth. My God, that's un-American. Why it's perfectly okay that 62 billionaires own more than half of the world's population. That's okay. Talking about the redistribution of wealth, that's subversive. We've already redistributed the wealth. It's gone up. Bernie Sanders is right about those things. It is subversive to think that people should have enough money. I'll tell you something. Henry Ford must have been subversive because he said, you've got to pay your workers enough so they can buy the cars. You can't just produce cars for the wealthy or you're going to have a very small auto industry, right? Which is bigger, General Motors or, I don't know, what's it, Ferrari or, I don't even know the names of these expensive cars, to tell you the truth. You get the idea. Okay. So somehow or other we got scared because let me tell you, it wasn't just brainwashing, it was real. I mean, they were carting people off to prison. People were losing their jobs. Great people, wonderful people, loving people, caring people. Teachers were fired. People were imprisoned for talking about ideas that were called subversive, ideas that are American ideas, American ideals. And it's still happening today. Not to the same degree, because there isn't that movement yet. We haven't been demanding cooperation, right? We haven't been demanding, but it's beginning to happen. People are getting angry, and people want a redistribution of wealth. Why? Because we produce it. See, this is not charity for the poor. I'm not saying I'm going to sit around in bed and eat bonbons and you should give me a castle. It means if I go to work and I'm producing the profit for the company, the profit should go to me and you when we do it together. But you see, capitalism is based on the idea that some guy or some group owns everything and they pay as little as they have to in order to get people to work, and then they take the profit. That's the system, right? Doesn't everybody know? Isn't that the way it is? I mean, isn't that like normal? No, it's not normal. It's just a social construct. It's a contract. It's a way we do business today. See? Doesn't mean it has to be that way. In fact, the opposite is happening in many places. I just read an article about a grocery chain called Winco, and they're growing up in the West, and they're really growing fast. And they are owned by the employees. That means that the employees have a stake in the company. That means there is no shareholders or board of directors, any of those. Well, they probably have a board of directors, but there's nobody who's representing shareholders that expect a return on their investment. So the money isn't going up, the money is spreading out. Subversive. And these guys have health care, they have pensions, they stay an average of 8 years on the job. Now, you find a chain like that. I understand there's another one called Publix. I don't know anything about it, but I was just told about it yesterday. That is based on similar lines. So what does that tell you? People who are owners have more investment in what they're doing because these guys are growing really fast because they have great workers, they have dedicated people, they don't have a vast turnover. See, common sense. If you have a stake in it, you know what is the greatest communist conspiracy in the whole world? It's called democracy. Democracy means we own it. We own the government. That's the way it's supposed to be. Remember? The government represents us. Well, do you feel that way about the government now? Do we own the government? Do you feel like you own the government? I mean, the way we feel now is that there is a handful of very wealthy people who try to own the government and who gerrymander and who rig elections and who buy off politicians and all of that kind of stuff. That's not American, guys. That's not democracy. But we just, it's like, oh, well, that's the way it is. It's the communist conspiracy that we should own the government. See, what I'm trying to tell you is that we are brainwashed. We can't even think about doing things differently from the way we do. But then there are people who are doing it differently. Sometimes companies have become cooperatives because for whatever reason, the company is going out of business and the workers buy it. That happens sometimes. Then there are others where, like doctors come together and they form a group where they own their practice. I mean, there's so many different ways that this can happen. Why isn't it happening more? And I'm going to tell you, it's part of it is brainwashing because we're so darned tuned into this is the way it is. Go get a job, go work for somebody. Oh yes, and they're going to take care of us forever. Go work for the post office, you'll have a pension. Right, work for General Motors and you'll have a job forever. Well, the last recession, the Great Recession they call it, wasn't so great, was it? That destroyed a lot of illusions. I mean, a lot of people have lost everything. A lot of working people, they had money in pension plans. The banks crapped out. The executives didn't go to jail, but the people who had their, who had all kinds of pensions lost all their money. We've lost some of those illusions. We don't expect anymore that we're going to get a job at 18 or 20 or 22 and 30 years later we're going to fly off on a golden umbrella, into our old age that's going to last way too long when we have way too little money. That illusion has been broken and people are frightened. People come out of college with debt up to their eyeballs. I remember when we had communism in New York, city colleges, they were all free. Free. Subversive. That's how I got a degree, whether you think it was a good thing or not. That's how I got one. A lot of people got one. City University, all the schools were free. We've been so brainwashed. The obvious things that we need, that we're told we're not supposed to ask for them, that this is wrong, that this is greedy on our part, that we're destroying business. Oh my God, we are destroying business, not business is destroying us. We are brainwashed. So that's number one. Secondly, gotta tell us, we are passive. In order for us to have cooperation, and I would like to call it not socialism, not communism, I'm thinking of calling it cooperativism. Or I could say I'm running on the ticket of universal potluck. passive. We sit there and say, God, I wish they would fix this. I wish they would do that. I wish they would do, why are we passive? Oh my God, so many reasons. So scared, so afraid, because we live in a society where we're afraid to take any chances, because when we fall big, boink. Where we don't feel like we have the support of the collective, of our families. We don't believe in taking care of one another when we fall, because we should raise ourselves by our bootstraps, and if we discover that there's nothing under us, it's just our own darn fault. We don't need a hand. No, that's un-American. Ridiculous. After slavery, all the slaves were supposed to get 40 acres and a mule. Didn't happen, did it? They were supposed to. Why? Because everybody had common sense, and they knew that people couldn't survive if they didn't have a way of supporting themselves. You don't take the people at the bottom, push them deeper into the dirt, like give them lead poisoning and lead poison their children, and then ask them to raise themselves from their bootstraps. And it never happened in the USA, by the way. Black people have always been at the bottom. And we did not take the accountability. So what I'm saying is, it's a very scary world out here. So people are afraid to do anything, but also people are afraid to rock the boat. People are afraid to step out of line. People are, raised by parents who didn't train them to think, or by schools who didn't want them to think, or about a society that forbids us to think, because if we think, we might overthrow the whole darn tootin' apple cart. So we are not encouraged to think. We are encouraged to conform. Do you think a whole bunch of conformists is going to go out there and start creating new models of how we do business? Of course not. But we got to get off our duffs. We have to wake up, because nobody's going to do it for us. You think that the owners of the billionaires, the people who own vast wealth, and own the factories, and own the financial services, are they looking for us to jump up and say, I think we need a different way of doing business? They are not going to do it for us, guys. We are going to have to start thinking, oh my God, not that, anything but that. I mean, the fact that women are still wearing high-heeled shoes in 2016, to me, is the greatest proof that human beings are blocked from thinking. Another reason we don't do this, right? Distrust. I don't trust you. You're going to screw me, so I'm going to take care of myself, right? We can't come together in a cooperative because I don't trust you. Isn't it weird how nobody questions a potluck? Nobody questions the barn raising. But we are taught to distrust each other. Oh yeah, we are the white working class. We're losing our wages. It's got to be those black people, or those immigrants, or those funny-looking people with big noses. That could be the Arabs. It could be the Jews. I'm one of those proud people. See, it's crazy. We are actually taught to distrust each other. And then, not only are we taught to distrust each other, then we do stupid things and hurt each other, and then we really have a reason to distrust each other, right? So what happens is there's a whole bunch of prejudice, and then people who feel discriminated against get angry. I mean, you look at it, it's happening right now with the Muslim population. The more that the Muslims, the young Muslims, are being marginalized, the more radical they become, because they feel so marginalized. So now they're really going to give you a reason to distrust. Distrust feeds distrust, guys. We got to cut it out. We have to start making an effort to see the people behind the nose. You put a whole bunch of guys in prison You treat them like shit. They become traumatized, throw them in solitary confinement, and then throw them on the street and say, I'm not going to hire that guy because I don't trust him. Well, I'm not saying there aren't people who are criminals, but I just read an article about in Denmark that in their prison system, they treat their prisoners very well, and they have a very small percentage of people who end up in prison again. I wonder why. I guess when you don't traumatize people or throw them together in seething anger, they do better and they come out better. Oh, no, not that. Too much common sense. See, and I'm called pie in the sky? It's pie in the sky to think that you're going to throw somebody in solitary confinement and that they're going to come out better than they were when you put them in, unless it happens to be Nelson Mandela from South Africa, who was like, a saint. You got a couple of guys like that, but for the rest of us, I wouldn't do well in solitary. You see, the real issue here is the ego. That's why we're stuck, because we are raised with one idea, which is me, 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 and me. And I got to get ahead, and everybody's my competitor. I look at sports, and I laugh, and then I cry. Sports, supposed to be a sport. You know what I mean? A game, right? Nobody's playing. They're all killing each other. And we have a program called Super Supportive Sundays, which is part of our campaign to unleash the power of kids. And we're teaching cooperative games. And we're teaching fitness, cooperation, service, and thought. Subversive. The kids love it. The parents love it. Everybody loves it. It's cooperative. Everybody goes out and plays a game in a cooperative way. But hey, that's pie in the sky. You couldn't replace football with that. No, it makes a lot more sense for you to go out and take your young people and give them brain damage. That is a lot more intelligent way to treat your population than offering them the alternative of cooperation and going and having fun in a cooperative way. Cooperation is subversive. Are you beginning to get my point? We are so brainwashed. People are still supporting the Super Bowl, even though day after day after day we see the stories coming out. 25-year-olds, 27-year-olds with CTE, permanent brain damage, not to speak of all the physical trauma that these kids get. We puff them up, we tell them they're heroes, we send them out, we make them fight each other. We sit there, eat and laugh and have a wonderful time and cheer. Hey, and somebody makes billions. We can't question that. That's the American way. It isn't the American way. It's been subverted. Kids in the neighborhood playing stickball like they did when I was a kid. You had a stick. Nobody had a baseball or a bat or, whatever we had, we threw. Whatever stick you had, we used. That's the American way. Don't take it too seriously. Have fun. Support each other. You know why? I'll tell you why. Because if you are in an environment where you need a barn raising and there's 20 people in your little town who have the capacity to raise that barn, do you want 30% of them to have brain damage? Which is what happens, that the NFL itself admits that 30% of their players are going to have permanent brain damage. So you have 20 people out there to raise the barn, but you take 30% of those 20 people, 6 guys, and knock them out because they can't remember how to tie their shoelaces. That's stupid. We are relying on each other. We need each other. We need each other to be smart. We need each other to be strong. If we were in a cooperative business, for example, we need somebody who has the brains to figure out this or that, or somebody who knows how to do accounting, or somebody has a good idea about marketing. And so, see, we would need each other. We would recognize that we need each other. But see, our little egos that tell us that we always have to be on top and we always have to win. No, 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 no. We have to be better than the other guy. We have to bash in the brains of the other guy. And what that does is it deprives us of people, of talent that we need for our survival. I would much rather be a worker in a well-functioning organization that takes care of its people so that it could earn the money so we would all do well, than to be in an organization where one person does well and the rest of us starve, because I wouldn't be the one who'd be on top. So what's with this ego of ours? We're taught to compete. We're taught that we have to be on top. We're taught that everything is about number one. We are not taught cooperation. I have a book. It's called Living with Reality. You can download it free from our website, www.theinnerrevolution.org. And it explains the ego very simply in the introduction of the book, about how we're born with it and how it grows and how it comes to overtake us and how it comes to dominate everything. So in this brief talk, I'm not going to get into what the ego is. I'm going to ask you to please take a look at it. But the bottom line is that it's about us seeing ourselves as separate individuals instead of as part of the oneness. You know, the inner revolution, we're saying we really need a revolution on every level. We need a whole world that's based on oneness, accountability, and mutual support. Like, we are each other, we need each other, we share the earth. We have discovered the hard way that our foolishness, that our selfishness, that our inability to think from a bigger perspective have brought us to the point possibly of extinction for ourselves as a species because of climate change. It's so obvious. We have got to change. We've got to get together, clean up the oceans. We have to get together and stop and turn around this climate change that is destroying people. Oh, I just saw the most awful picture of this poor cattle in Zimbabwe because of drought. Where we are, we're not even seeing the half of how bad climate change is around the world. Of course, disproportionately hurting poor people. But we need more than that. We need to come together and start cooperating in everything. We need to bring our government back to we the people, as Bernie Sanders is saying. But we also need to be looking at our whole economy. We need a potluck economy. We need more and more people to come together and create cooperative enterprises that serve not only their employees, but their customers. We need to get rid of and hold accountable those corporations that have killed people knowingly, like DuPont, that dumped toxic chemicals in the waters in West Virginia and Ohio. That now that toxicity is all over the world. They knew it, they killed people, but they're not in jail. We need to take back the power from those people. And I'm going to tell you something, they need it too. There is nobody who is engaged in this corrupt, heartless system who is not negatively impacted. That money may be coming out of your pocket, but the human beings that make these choices to put, as the popular saying is, profits over people, are sick. They're sick inside, and they're haunted. this isn't working for anybody. Cooperation is America. We were founded by little communities of people that were cooperative. I'm not saying that we also didn't have big imperialist, like the British companies and so on, the Netherlands, the capitalists coming over here as well. But I'm saying this is an essential part of who we are. If we can have a potluck, we can have a new world. Believe in it, fight for it. Thank you.